Name is Westside Jeff, sitting in for Chris Crock. Chris is off this week. I'm with you tonight, tomorrow night, and Chris is back on Monday. But you and I, we're first name basis. Just call me Jeff. My story's simple. I was born and raised up in the state of Ohio. I get a chance to sit here in the studio and have a great community conversation with you when I fill in, and I love to fill in. My story, if you will, is I'm not the guy that goes home and turns on the TV and watches Netflix and all kinds of movies and reruns. And I'm kind of boring, I guess. You go to you come over to my house and I've got on one of the news channels, Fox or MSNBC or CNN or one of the News Nation. I'm a consumer. I consume information is what I do. And one of the things I do is when I consume that information and I read a lot of different publications, I find myself going to different places, both those that lean left and those that lean right, because I want to get a good balance of it, because you can't get balance anymore. And I find myself having a time to process what I'm reading and seeing, consuming, and analyze it, and then I formulate an opinion. And that's what this is. This is an opinionated show. I get a chance to talk about what I like, what I talk about, and what I care about. And it usually has to do with what's going on in the news. And I give you an opinion. And it's an opportunity for you to weigh in. And more often than not, people say, you know what, Jeff, you're right. I agree with you. Because all I do is I give you common sense opinion on current events. Let's start with the biggest story of the day today. And that is tonight, the massive cell phone outage impacting AT&T customers nationwide, unable to call people, unable to text, unable to take calls, unable to have access to the internet for hours. That started today in the middle of the night while we were sleeping at about 2 a.m. here in Dallas, North Texas area. And according to AT&T tonight, they say everything is back to normal. Now, today, Americans got very uneasy. You could just see it. I following the news, watching the news, and paying attention to it. And then I went to social media and seeing what people are saying about it, see what's trending on X, see what comments are coming up on Facebook and on Instagram. And Americans got uneasy. And it's a reminder of how dependent we are on our devices. This is the first scenario that I can remember. I go back to the 90s, and I like to say that the Gulf War really put CNN on the map. That's when CNN was born. I mean, CNN was around forever, but the Gulf War really legitimized CNN, because that was the first time that you and I were sitting around, turned on the TV, and we were watching live play-by-play of wartime activities in real time on CNN. Today was one of those groundbreaking moments equally in a different way. And that is, we learned very quickly today how dependent we are on our devices, how important those are, how naked we feel when we don't have them. Now, tonight, after hours-long and wide-ranging outage, AT&T says they have restored all cell phone services to impacted customers. Many of whom woke up early in the morning to cell phones that weren't making outward bound calls or incoming phone calls or text messages. AT&T has not stated how many customers were affected. You hear numbers out there, you see numbers out there, but those numbers aren't from AT&T. I'll come back to that in 3 minutes and tell you more about the numbers. But AT&T is not the one saying, here's how many people are affected. I find that interesting. I wonder if they don't know or they're just not releasing it. And events of today just go to reinforce something that I've been talking about most of this week. And that is, we as consumers of products, of information, of life, have less faith in leaders and transparency in our institutions than we did a year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago. We're in an era we don't trust a lot of what we hear, a lot of what we read, and a lot of what we experience. We just Our faith is waning. And today's events don't do anything to help that cause, so to speak. So many customers were affected, but several cities were really impacted. North Texas and Dallas here, certainly with AT&T corporate headquarters here, was very affected. Now, I've got friends across the country. I talked to, remember, again, I'm born and raised up in the state of Ohio. I talked to some buddies up in Ohio today, many of them who also had that problem. I did not have that problem. I was not without a phone. I was not down because I have Verizon. It didn't impact me. I've read online, I've heard online, I've seen people say that Verizon was affected. I wasn't. Didn't impact me. I never had a problem, but certainly I've seen comments across social media that others who have Verizon and other services were impacted. So it'll be interesting to see what the outcome of that is. That lasted for hours, these outages. And the latest is the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security are investigating it. Now, when I hear, one of the things I know about federal agencies, if this were just simple, a fleeting moment of a technical error, something tells me, my gut feel, just a feel, that Homeland Security and FBI would not be investigating it. But with them investigating it, it has my radar up. And it has my radar up from a perspective to my brain is telling me, keep an eye on this story because there may be something bigger to it than I know or that I feel. So I'm just keeping my eye on it. Now, all day long, I was scanning across social media, watching it play out, and some people were just mad as hell. They were just angry as all get out. But I contend that's part of the problem in our country today, that people are angrier than ever before. We'll talk about that later. Some didn't care. But what I was surprised about today is how many people were being alarmists. That's what I call them, alarmists. The world's coming to an end. The Russians are causing this. The Democrats are doing this. They're alarmists. They don't know. They're just throwing crap out there, hoping it sticks to the wall, blaming somebody. They wanted to blame anybody. I saw people blaming Russia, blaming Putin, blaming the DNC, the Democratic National Committee, Joe Biden, all kinds of conspiracy theorists out there. The two consistent themes that I did see across the line as I read all the comments, multiple places across the country, I saw two consistent themes. Number one was people very happy, rejoicing, celebrating as if they had just gotten a get out of jail free card, posting that they finally felt new again. They felt free again because they weren't tethered to a phone. And I sense by looking at that, those were a lot of working folks who are 40 and older. Those under 40, those in the 20s, they were livid. They can't live their lives without their phones. The second element of the people I saw posting today about AT&T and the outage is people mad and demanding credit against their bill. Hey, AT&T, I demand a credit. So it was interesting watching the different kinds of posts and categories that I saw two of them. People, number one, really happy, rejoicing, and saying, oh, great, a day off work, I'm not tethered to my phone, and then people who are mad. But you have to understand that technologies that we use today are extremely complicated, and they're complex. And today's outage highlights how complex, how complicated these things are. Today's outage also is a reminder to us of how dependent we have become on our phones, on our connections, on the connectivity we have to the internet. Today's outage reminds us all how dependent we are on and how vulnerable we are. So I want to ask you, I've got to hit a quick break on the other side of this. I want to take some calls and see, how did this impact you? Were you one of those that were just angry as hell because your phone was out, or are you one of those that said, great, turn it off and throw it away? I'm curious how today's outage, did it get your emotions fired up one way or another? For me, it wouldn't have. I just roll with the punches. But I'd like to hear from you. Did it impact you one way or another? Really good, really bad? What emotion were you feeling today as this was going on? 888-288-9227. That's 888-288-WBAP is my number. You can also hit me up across social media at Westside Jeff. My name is Jeff. It's Westside Jeff, and for Chris Crock on News Talk 820. WBAP and now on FM at 93.3. So AT&T was down today, and it caused a lot of phones across the country to go dead on them and no service. So no phone calls out, no phone calls in, no text, no opportunity for internet. AT&T says it's back up and running. I got to ask you the question is, as a consumer, now it didn't affect me because I have Verizon, so it didn't impact me. But I got to ask you, when your phone went out, when you were down, when your phone was not working, what were the emotions you were feeling and why? 800-288-9227, 800-288-WBAP. By the way, I'm one of those older guys. And for all those young kids that I work with these days that keep giving me hell about having a landline, I got one thing to say to you. Nah, 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 nah. You make fun of me for having a landline. Well, guess what? My landline worked all day today. Nah, 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 nah. But my cell phone did too. But if something goes down, I got a backup plan. You don't. So how about that? I did see a post from Casey Bartholomew. He was a little upset today. He posted earlier that he was very upset that, first of all, he wasn't bothered that he missed anything, but then he got service and he realized that he missed 30 phone calls from his, let's call her his wife, Casey's wife, Carrie Underwood. Whatever. He posted that Carrie was trying to get a hold of him all day for a booty call, is what he posted. So I got one word for you, Casey. Stalker. 800-288-9227. 800-288-WBAP. My name's Jeff. It's Westside Jeff in for Chris Crock. How did phone lines going down impact you? And what were the emotions that you were feeling? Gabriel from Fossil Ridge, you're on with Westside Jeff, News Talk 820 WBAP and now on FM at 93.3. Tell me what you think.
First of all, nice to be on, man. This is my first time calling. I'm fairly young. I'm 41 years old. But I'm going to be quite honest with you. I was pretty much thinking, like, there is no way that a satellite could not transmit to my cell phone and not make a call. And so I grew up in the 90s, and I've had cell phones my whole life. But when my son woke me up this morning, I was terrified. So it showed me some things about myself, to be honest, and it was kind of scary. You were talking about a landline. I work from home, and all the people were talking about the phones and things of that nature. And the older guy said, well, can't you just use your landline? And somebody sent a message, smoke signals, and we got all these labs and all this stuff. And it tripped me out because I'm like, this guy's the only one prepared.
Now, you know what a landline is, right, Gabriel?
Yeah, I'm actually getting ready to graduate from cybersecurity school here in a second, and I knew that quite a while ago when I was in the military. But it's just phenomenal how dependent we are. We're like sheep almost. Like anything can affect us. Yeah,
absolutely. It's interesting. So you were terrified. I wouldn't have been terrified. Are you married, Gabriel?
I am married with children, and that's the thing. It's a responsibility for me. Like I said, I'm 41 years old. I'm not perfect, but I most definitely try to raise my family in perfection. It amazes me how handicapped I was as a father and a husband, because I couldn't call my wife because she goes to work early in the morning. She's gone before 7 o'clock. My son, he's coming in and saying, "Oh, did you pay the phone bill?" Which I've never heard before, but I'm like, what?
I heard that so many times today.
And all that means to me is saving somebody from dying in the water, like the little inner tube.
Yeah.
So it kind of scared me a lot, man. And I think that sometimes it feels like it goes back to feeling protected in America, period, because you kind of think like we have all these satellites in space. We always hear about people that, whatever country it is, Russia, China, whatever, that have bad intentions. And when you don't feel protected, it is amazing, in the words of Jesse Peterson.
You almost sound like you felt violated a little bit.
Well, I'm going to tell you this. It's not feeling violated. It's feeling exposed.
Yeah. Good word.
I mean, you have to wait for somebody else to do something for you to communicate with the outside world.
Welcome to old age, my brother. Welcome to old age. Sometimes at old age, you kind of got to wait for others to help you do some things. You know what I mean? So you said you felt terrified. What about your wife? Was she equally terrified?
Well, I didn't get to speak with her. Her phone was, whenever her phone came back on, my phone her phone came on before mine. So I don't think that she was equally terrified, because she's used to me being the one that's kind of going to be the protector. We are traditional. I grew up in Arkansas, grew up in church and things of that nature. Most people don't like me to say that, but it's true. And so that's how my household is. That's how we run our household.
Sure.
And so she wasn't terrified. To her, it was just the phones are not working and things of that nature. But that's why I was saying that when I was on my venture to get my cybersecurity degree, I have been amazed by how much information is exposed through YouTube, TikTok, and all kinds of stuff. And it correlates with the way the federal government are trying to regulate things or non-regulate things or whatever the case may be. But it amazes me that it seems as if you're literally in a country that when you look at the news, you see a lot of like social type things, but you don't see the fact that people are literally collecting your information. System goes down. Who knows who did it? I don't know. I'm not going to be a conspiracy.
We're leaving cookies everywhere, my brother.
Yeah, I'm just saying. It seems to me like it is not a normal thing. I've never seen that happen since cell phones were invented, and I'm, like I said, 41 years old, so that means that I was there when it first started, the dial-ups and making all kinds of noises and things like that to get on the internet. But now it's just getting to a point where it is, we are literally vulnerable. And I don't mean to scare people, but it's the literal truth.
Terrified. That's how you felt. Gabriel, thanks for listening to the radio station tonight. I appreciate it. Thanks for joining along and giving a call, and I appreciate you weighing in. Thanks for listening. That's Gabriel. I appreciate your call. Bottom of the hour news coming up in a matter of minutes. Got Lori. I was talking to Lori Waffenschmidt during the break there, and she said coming up she's got some new news on Ukraine aid coming up, and also an update on the call on the self-service coming back on. So that's coming up in about 4 minutes. On the other side of that, I want to talk about something that I just learned recently, and that is that many of you have something in your home or your parents' homes or someone's home that could be worth $2,000, $3,000, $5,000, and you don't even know it. I'll explain that. We'll talk a little more about it in about 6 minutes. My name's Jeff. It's Westside Jeff, and for Chris Crock on News Talk 820. WBAP, and now on FM at 93.3. Westside Jeff in for Chris Crock here on News Talk 820 WBAP, sitting in Chris's chair tonight, tomorrow night. Bunch of ways to reach out on across social media at Westside Jeff. You can pick up the phone and dial 800-288-9227. My mom died in 2004, and part of the decree of her estate, which I oversaw, was that our cousin lived in her condominium, and Mom said the cousin should stay there as long as she wants and can pay her bills until she doesn't want to or she passes. Well, the cousin passed away not long ago, and as I'm going through my mom's condo, finally, all kinds of boxes I'm finding, and a lot of boxes with stuff that is really old. And I'm trying to figure out how do I decipher through what is valuable and what's junk? because I've gone through and said, okay, me and the family want this, but I have a lot of boxes left over of stuff that I would just look at it and call junk, but I don't want to throw junk away and think, oh my God, and find out a couple years from now something's worth a lot of money. Well, I got a buddy, as you know, I'm from the state of Ohio. I got a buddy from back home in Ohio, Columbus. I met a while back. His name is Rich Lynn, and he owns a toy store, a collectible toy and vintage toy collectible store up in Columbus. So I called him and said, hey, Rich, tell me about a couple of these things. And he's like, Jeff, don't throw those away. One of them was a light bright. I've got 3 light brights and 2 of them still in the original boxes. And he's like, keep that. So he and I've talked a couple times. I said, hey, would you join me on the radio and talk about this? Because there's some great, he was going on and on about stories. So I asked him to join me. Rich is joining me now. His name is Rich Lynn. He owns a store called Hobbies Galore up in Columbus, Ohio. And he knows the value of toys and vintage collectibles. Rich, you've told me several stories about some of the products and items that you've seen. Give our listeners a kind of a feel of what may be in someone's attic, their parents' house, that has some value that they don't even know yet.
Sure, Jeff. So, I mean, it could be a variety of things. Everything lies in the eye of the beholder, right? So there's going to be a market for just about anything you find. You just got to find the right market for it. So a couple of the bigger things right now that are hot, especially with the baby boomers getting older and the next generation getting older, they still have toys sitting back at mom's house in the basement. You know, everything from the 70s, the 80s, early 90s, stuff like that is starting to take hold again because they want to buy their childhood back. They want those memories back, you know, and they're willing to pay top dollar for these things. So it's really a pick of what you got and what you can work with. But just a few examples real quick. I mean, anything from the 80s line of Hasbro, like, you know, the old shows, the cartoons I used to watch as a kid, G.I. Joe and Masters of the Universe, He-Man stuff, and, you know, My Little Ponies, Night Brights, everything you could imagine from being a memory of your childhood. Finding those gems in the basement is worth dollars. And
so G.I. Joes are worth money? My old G.I. Joes is still worth money?
Definitely, and the more complete, the better. And I'll tell you, the gold in those lies in the bottom of the box, and it's all about the pieces and the parts. The more complete you can make that original toy, the more money it's worth. So that being said, anything that's mint in the box, still sealed, you know, bubbles and the cards look nice and everything, those are going to be your top dollar items. Boiling all the way down to loose items, you know, you can sell it in any way, shape, or form, and people will buy it up and complete their own sets and get those memories back.
Rich, we're talking to Rich Lynn. He's a buddy of mine, lives up in Ohio, and he owns a store. It's called Hobbies Galore. If you want to check him out, it's hobbies-galore.com. He knows toys and collectibles. I've been in his store a couple years ago. It is the size of a frickin' Walmart almost. It's amazing how big. I was surprised the first time I walked in there and was like, whoa, this is massive. And you buy used toys or vintage toys and vintage collectibles too. So if someone's looking to sell them, you buy them, but you also...
Sure, yeah, we buy stuff across the country. We buy stuff out of the country. You know, we just set it up through PayPal and some form of payment, and we mail it in, and, you know, we deal with it like that. We can usually give assessments online or over the phone, but some things you just have to see in person before you can make an offer on them. But there's a lot of gems out there that people don't realize they're just giving away or throwing away, or, you know, underpricing these things at, like, yard sales and stuff, because, to be honest, a lot of those things that, you know, in this market people find at yard sales, and then or thrift stores, and they'll take and turn around and flip it online for 3 times, 4 times the amount of money that they bought it for. So there's profit margin in all these things. It just takes a little bit of research into the market.
What are some of the things, Rich, that you are seeing now that you've, in the last just couple months, that you've bought vintage toys or vintage collectibles from somebody that might surprise me?
So I had a guy who had a huge comic book collection, and he had a lot of toys with it too and everything, and he didn't really value the comics that much. But when we got a hold of it, we were pulling out first editions left and right, and I guess he just lost interest in it. But, I mean... It was a 2,500 book collection, and we paid like I think 1,200 for it or something like that because he had some good ones in there. But to find the gold that we found in there that he just disregarded, didn't care about it, and that's how we make our money. It's bread and butter. So we go out there and we hunt these things. And what's great now about having a store is I don't have to go around, to yard sales and to thrift shops and estate sales and do all that hunting myself. Having a brick and mortar location, the hunters come to you, and that's kind of a nice, convenient thing. So,
yeah, I get it.
It sure beats the grind.
Dude, I get it. Talking to my buddy Rich Lynn. He lives up in Columbus, Ohio. He owns a store called Hobbies Galore. So you can check him out at hobbies-galore.com. If somebody wants to connect with you, they can email you. I know your email address is hobbiesaplenty, so hobbies and the letter or A, plenty at gmail.com. Let me ask you about some of the toys that I still have. Some of the things that I found in the boxes I took out of my mom's house. Several Matchbox cars, including Matchbox cars in the kit, in the container that contain, not the packaging, but that carry box that you have.
Yeah, the little car kits that they store them in. Yeah, the cargo boxes. Yeah, those are valuable too. So especially cars from the 70s and 80s, because in Hot Wheels, they call them red lines. And they have little red lines on the tires. So if you have those little die-cast 64 scale cars, check the wheels, because if they have red lines around the tires and they're older, they're worth money. And we're talking, it's all about condition again. But if you got some mint condition ones, they're anywhere from $50 and up a piece, easily. I've
got a bunch of Hot Wheels too, dude.
Yeah.
What about my Tonka toys? I got a bunch of Tonka toys.
So Tonka, it kind of went the way of the Beanie Baby in the sense of demand. Beanie Babies kind of flared really fast and then died out really fast. And there's like one out there that's worth some money. It's like one of the Princess Diana ones. But Tonka kind of took the same route. So they just didn't have a demand for them anymore. Every once in a while, we get a dad that comes in and wants to buy one for his kid because he had one when he was little, and we have them laying around, and, in good shape. They're, $5, $10, $15, $20, depending on which one they are. But the market's just kind of slowed down on the Tonka stuff.
What about my light brights?
Definitely a market for light brights. And again, it's all about condition. And collectors who buy these things, half of them are going to play with them or pull them out for their kids. The other half are going to have them for nostalgia. So they kind of just want to put them on the shelf, and they want those to be like pristine condition, crispy box edges, no scratches, no dents. Pickers are picky, and they get that because they're paying top dollar for it, but they will pay top dollar for it, and that's the key. So if you got tickets that are really nice, don't let it go for cheap. Don't cheat yourself.
How about Viewmasters or Cabbage Patch Kids?
Cabbage Patch dolls, mint in the packaging, like original packaging, you can probably get a few bucks for. Loose ones that have been played with, and the ones that have seen sometimes, they don't go for as much. And it all depends on which one you got, again, because there's certain ones that are more rare than others. And that's the crazy thing about toy and collectible markets is that something could be expensive one day and cheap the next. It all depends on how many is on the market for sale and how in demand they are.
We're talking with Rich Lynn. He's a buddy of mine. He lives up in Ohio. That's where I'm from. He owns a store. It's called Hobbies Galore, and he travels around the country and buys vintage toys and vintage collectibles. But he has a store that he also sells them out of. If you want to reach out to him, you can do that at hobbiesplenty at gmail.com. Also at hobbies-galore.com. Talking to him because I found a bunch of old toys in my mom's attic, some of my old toys, and I called him and said, I've known Rich for a while, and said, hey, is there any value to these things, or I throw them away? And he said, dude, I'll take them. Yes, there's some value there. And I thought it'd be a great conversation for the radio because I think he said, Jeff, it's amazing how many people have things like this stashed away worth a lot of money. Rich, can you stick around for a minute? I want to get into talking about trains and some of the ceramic collectibles and some of the other things of value that you would encourage our listeners to look for that could bring several hundred, if not thousands of dollars. Stick around. I got to hit a quick break. We'll come back to Rich in about 4 minutes. I'm Westside Jeff, sitting in for Chris Crock on News Talk 820 WBAP and now on FM at 93.3. Westside Jeff in for Chris Crock tonight on News Talk 820 WBAP. We're talking to Rich Lynn. Rich owns a vintage toy store, and collectible store up in Ohio. I met Rich years ago, and I called him because as I'm cleaning out my mom's place and going through my mom's stuff, and as my wife and I are kind of looking through my stuff, I'm finding all kinds of stuff. I called him and said, Rich, and this stuff worth money? He's like, dude, you've got quite a bit there that either you need to hold on to it or I'll buy it. He buys collectible toys. He buys old hobby stuff, and he also sells it. So if you want to sell it to him, he can give you a value of it, or if you want to buy stuff, he's got it. Name of the store is called Hobbies Galore. It's up in Ohio, and the website is hobbies-galore.com. Rich, let me ask you some questions. What about trains? Sure. My dad had an old train set that literally, I need to take a picture and send it to you since I'm down here and you're up there. But yeah, it probably weighs, the engine alone, 7 or 8 pounds, and it's about the size. I mean, it's large.
Yeah.
What about trains and train sets?
It's probably an O gauge. They're pretty big. So you got different scales when it comes to trains. You got your O gauge, you've got your N gauge, you've got a few different ones, but the one you're talking about sounds like a big one, so it's probably an O gauge. Do you know if it's Bachman or if it's a Thurn or?
I don't know. I got to get pictures. I'll send you pictures of it.
Yeah, for sure.
Is there value to that?
Definitely, especially in the old school ones, like Lionels, Bachmans. The newer Thurns are okay, but the vintage ones like the Lionels and the Bachmans are where your money's at, especially in the O gauge or the N gauge or scale gauge. Those are all, HO size. Those are going to be your basic, around the Christmas tree kind of trains or dad's, playroom in the basement.
Yeah.
And there's still a lot of money in those, especially if they look good, they operate, so it's definitely something to hold on to or look into if you've got a lot of them, getting them either auctioned off or get a good deal for them because, like I said, they're worth some money.
I posted some stuff online, Rich, and had some comments, and people asked me to ask about them. How about 1990? Let me give you a couple things. 1990s era type Star Wars toys, including Phantom Menace toys.
So anything that's Power of the Force from like the 90s stuff. So when Phantom Menace came out, so that whole line of toys from there up until about 2007, there's still a demand for them. They're not as popular as the vintage stuff is, or as like some of the Black Series stuff that's out now, like Power of the Force and the redbacks, greenback cards. They kind of died off a little bit, but there's still money in them. Just not as much as some of the other classes at the moment. But again, it can change. It's just Jar Jar Binks killed it for the franchise.
Yeah. Good point. What about the value of things like ceramic collectibles, Barbies? How about Radio Shack toys or vintage board games?
Anything vintage like Radio Shack, since they're gone, rest their soul. Radio Shack, vintage radios, anything that says Radio Shack on it, it has a collector's market for it. And again, it's all about condition. So, for instance, I have an old radio that looks like it's from the 40s, but it's got Radio Shack hard emblems on it, and you can tell it was old school, and it still works. It's sitting in my shop now. I play the radio on it all the time, and it's just one of those things that I don't want to sell it because I don't think I'll ever see another one in that condition.
What's something like that worth? What could you sell that for?
To the right guy, a couple of $100, and I mean, it was probably like a $40 radio back in the day.
Wow.
But given inflation and everything stays the same, it's probably a couple $100. Yeah. But like you were saying, as far as Barbies go and like porcelain stuff, there is a collector's market for all those things. You just have to find them. And I'm thinking that the Barbies are getting fewer and farther between just because that era is starting to die out. The early Barbie fans aren't collecting as much anymore. And when you try to pass things like that down to the new generation, kids nowadays want instant gratification. They don't want to play with toys. So it's like a lot of the collectors that we see are 20 years old to 50 years old. Because they want to recapture their childhood moments of what they played with, what they had. It happens in the store all the time. People just reminisce their first couple of trips, and then there's something that they just remember, and they have to come back and get it. And that's how we snag them. Nostalgia sells, buddy.
Boy. Hey, Rich, what are
dolls,
some?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Porcelain dolls, there's a market for. Like precious moments, those are like little items you can get that have like psalms on them, stuff like that. They're real Christian, and those are good. The people like those. they're pretty still collectible. Anything the dolls with the faces, the hard faces, it's a niche community. So you got to find those people, but they're out there. So when you got stores like mine, you have a little bit of everything. That way somebody leaves with something they like.
Rich, if any of our listeners have questions, will you help them, give them an idea? Because they're doing the same thing I am, and that is going through old stuff and trying to figure out, is this junk or is there some value?
Yeah. If anybody has questions, they can hit us up through the website message portal. You can email us at hobbiesaplenty@gmail.com. You can hit us up on social media, Facebook and Instagram. All those links are on our bottom of our website, so you can just kind of go to the website and find those little addresses down there and click them. It'll take you right to social media, and you can message us directly right through there. If you have questions or if you have anything you want to sell, stuff like that. Yeah.
Excellent. Rich, thanks for taking the time tonight to join me for a few minutes. I know it's late up there in Ohio. I appreciate it. I'll text you some pictures of that train set because there may be something to that. Do you get into sports cards at all?
Sports cards are tricky. You got to know the players. You got to know the game. So I do a little bit of stuff that's slabbed, meaning that it's already been sent off and it's graded, and I don't have to really look up the condition value and everything because I'm not that guy. But if it's already predetermined and set in acrylic, I'll buy them and trade them and sell them. Yeah, there's a market for them for sure.
Cool. Hey, dude, thanks very much. I'll shoot you a text offline and go from there. And if some listeners reach out to you, they can do that. I appreciate you taking the time. Thanks, Rich.
For sure. You have a good night. God bless.
You too, man. That's Rich Lynn, a buddy of mine, lives up in Ohio, and I'm going through my mom's stuff. I'm finding all kinds of old things. I called him and said, hey, can you help me with this? And he's like, yeah, send me pictures. I did, and I'm like, wow, unbelievable. And I posted some things, and some people went, wow, I've got X, Y, and Z. So I wanted to get him on the horn and ask about it. If you want some information on it, his name is Rich Lynn. He's owns the store Hobbies Galore. It's up in Ohio. His website is hobbies-galore.com. His email is hobbiesplenty@gmail.com. You can hit me up across social media if you want, and I'll give you that information also. On the other side of this, I want to talk about, what do you have as collectibles? I just threw out a bunch of stuff I have. Love to hear what you've got. My name's Jeff. It's Westside Jeff, in for Chris Kroc on News Talk 820 WBAP and now at FM 93.3.